Welcome to the Tech and Space Leaders Show, where we learn lessons from leaders of the new frontier. I am your host, Lisa Dreher, and I'm really excited to introduce our guest for today, Gary Barnhard. He is the president and CEO of XISP. Welcome to the show, Gary.
Glad to be here, Lisa. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for making time. Maybe we can start by having you give a little bit of background on yourself and XISP.
Great. Well, my background is I'm a robotic space systems engineer. It's also been involved in a wide range of computer, robotics, space, and utility systems engineering work throughout my professional career. I have, in terms of the sorts of things that I've been involved with, back in the day, I owned the system level requirements for advanced automation and robotics for what's become the International Space Station. And my team wrote the robotic systems and integration standards from scratch. I've been on, in the 47 plus years I've been in the space business, I have been on every side of the table, from, as a NASA grantee, as representing, the government in various capacities, to a small contractor, large contractor, as running a nonprofit organizations. And university involvement. So I've run the gambit there. The deal with respect to Extraordinary Innovative Space Partnerships Inc. is we're in the what we call the technology development, demonstration, and deployment cislunar mission development business. The intellectual conceit is that there is a significant amount of stranded intellectual property on the wrong side of the technology development valley of death. And the idea that you could go and curate that intellectual property, figure out who thinks they own what constitutes the public domain, who cares about what, who really the stakeholders are, and that as a consortium, you could go through and define some number of missions where each increment of resources you put into them results in something of demonstrable value that one or more other missions, can actually make use of and hopefully help pay for. Bottom line is if you can find somebody to go write you a big check to go do something, have at it. It's a whole hell of a lot easier. But there are certain classes of what we consider general problems where that really isn't an option. It's not like there's some guarantee on any form of intellectual property lock. What you're doing is you're creating new markets.
Mm-hmm.
And, as a consequence, it takes a different approach. There's an argument to be made that this sounds like as I said, a rather complex way to tilt at things. But traditionally, in terms of trying to understand a business, the conventional adage is you follow the money. With respect to most technology development work, that's grossly insufficient. What you need to do is follow the resources. Okay. And because oftentimes the resources that are put into it, both cash and in kind, vary dramatically. And that ends up what becomes enabling in those regards. From what we've been doing with respect to XISP Inc., we have a number of what we consider core missions that we've defined that have fit this test. One falls underneath the rubric of Alpha CubeSat, which is how it got started, which is the idea that you could take and build small modular spacecraft that could become essentially building blocks or infrastructure nodes that could be aggregated to build larger scale systems. When we got started in earnest, proximate to 2013 or so on this, the idea that essentially CubeSats or small sats would be something other than just a passing academic interest was not clear.
Mhm.
And the Alpha CubeSat was a project where we had approximately 30 different individuals got together as part of NASA's CubeQuest challenge activity, stood up a team, and decided that we would build a spacecraft because we could. Some of the other core missions include space solar power and ancillary services beaming.
Mhm.
We're looking at it from space to space, then surface to surface on the moon, space to the lunar surface or to an asteroidal surface, and finally space to Earth considerations. Another one of the core missions is interoperable network communication architectures. Basically, the idea that your communications capabilities, particularly in space, could evolve from essentially being what's euphemistically known as bent pipe operations on a highly scheduled basis with fixed frequencies and fixed allocations to a dynamic allocation of communication resources. There seems to be a significant amount of interest in that. Then we have what we call management operations control architecture applications, which is in effect, how one goes and builds near real-time state models. So you can, in current vernacular, digital twins of systems of systems for problems that require that. And then there's, our last of the core missions is halfway to anywhere, which the notion is that there's what's what are at least in certain portions of the country are called alternate minimum energy trajectories. Others call them weak stability boundary transitions. The bottom line is that there are alternate trajectories which, combined with appropriate low thrust, long duration propulsion capabilities and high thrust, shorter duration capabilities, and a willingness to do the math, can dramatically alter the amount of energy that it takes to move a spacecraft or a structure from one place in space to another. And what we've discovered is that these combinations of missions end up forming an interesting Venn diagram where if the Venn diagram is the elephant, it really doesn't matter that much which piece you look at first. Okay, you end up at that at that intersection.
Yeah.
And broadly put, these are all what are classified as n-dimensional interaction problems. Very complex, near real time, requirements for being able to model the behavior of systems, which coincidentally happens to align with my original research work with NASA back in the day on the application of knowledge-based systems to the domain of spacecraft systems engineering while I was at NASA Goddard. So it comes full circle in those regards.
Okay, so those sound like a lot of really interesting projects. Now, how are these partnerships that you're forming it sounds like the development of these types of solutions? How do you take that to, I guess, a commercially viable product or solution, or is that part of the whole process?
It is part of the process. I'm coming from also a commercial background where I made commercial systems engineering consulting firm work that's done a variety of product development efforts. And what we found is that there occasionally you would run into a problem where a client was willing to pay the full freight to do the necessary research work and research and development work to field something to meet their
Mhm.
requirements. Comparatively rare, but it did happen from time to time. Now,
Sure.
we also encountered situations where we would have multiple clients that all needed the same thing, Okay, and it may be 2 or 3 or some small number of them, and effectively what they could go off and do is sign up to purchase it from us, and their the research and development cost would be essentially split between them.
Oh.
And we handled that on a internal on our side, and that enabled us to produce the product. We did end up in situations though where once that number goes from 2 to 3 to closer to 10,
Yeah.
at a certain point we would just do it as a speculative investment and just build it. um, the So that's an example of how in the commercial world we would effectively build up a consortium based on perceived client requirements in
Yeah,
those
that's
regards.
fascinating. That's fascinating.
Um,
So how do you deal with, I guess, I don't know, challenges with conflict of interest or just the whole competition thing between the companies, right? Is it they're actually going to utilize that ultimate technology for a different final purpose, or how do you deal with that?
Most of our clients in the in the commercial world, from were IT clients, that had fiduciary responsibility for their data. Accounting firms, law firms, finance, insurance, medical, what have you. And competition really wasn't an issue with them. The question was, how could they effectively meet their requirements?
Hmm.
Okay, and as a consequence, the we were in a situation where we were taking care of essentially managed point of presence systems in their for their businesses, and they were totally reliant on us for their infrastructure. So we long past got made it through trust issues in those regards. The analogy with respect to the space mission development business, though,
Yeah,
is that it's a you could think of it as a combination of a management of risk and a management of understanding. Risk from the standpoint of cost, schedule, and technical risk about investing in any technology endeavor. If you have a clue as to who thinks they own what, okay, and what constitutes the public domain, that reduces your risk.
yes,
Okay, so if you're interested in a particular technology milieu, if you will, or a particular area, having a seat at the table where you get that critical data, okay, is well worth it.
yeah,
Okay, going through and figuring out your ability to play well with others. Okay, going from essentially cooperation to collaboration, discovering where you can work with uh, you know um, a range of potential partners with the technology, be it individuals or small companies or larger companies, and being able to with benefit from an understanding of how to manage those relationships,
sure,
so that it ends up in a reasonable manner.
right.
Is a very challenging, costly, and risky process for a
Mm.
business. So the collaboration stuff ends up being, you could think of it as a crucible of understanding. You have to find some way of coming to terms with that, because that's the environment you would be bringing a product into.
Mhm.
Okay, which leads you to this notion of competition.
Right.
If you're going to field a product, you want to know who your competitors are. Okay, and so this the radical notion that you could pull together a consortium that allows for uh, cooperation, collaboration, and an understanding of competition is not, on first blush seems like, well, how could you possibly do that? But when
Right.
you examine it closer, there is very compelling reasons if if you're willing to invest in a technology or contemplating so, being a seat at the table of such a consortium.
Sure.
Now, traditionally, the way that this is done, though, is you find organizations that have had the resources to invest in and curate their own intellectual property catalogs, and they come upon an area that's of interest, and they foster the development of a consortium, and they show up at the table and say, this is what the deal is. We either all sit around and we talk about this and we figure out a way how to work together, or we're going to open up our intellectual property catalog and we're going to have a discussion about who owns what.
Yeah.
And when the IBMs of the world or the Intels of the world, start doing that, there is precious little under the sun that they haven't tilted at to some degree, and they've got more lawyers than pretty much anyone else does.
Sure.
Okay, so the net result is that they can by the potential risks associated with them opening up their intellectual property catalog, it's better to it's better to strike a deal with them on a level playing ground rather than them forcing your hand.
Sure. Sure. Wow. Okay. So that's a lot to talk through. So that is very interesting perspective. Excuse me. Can you maybe talk about a successful example?
There are I have a few in those regards. One from a commercial standpoint is we ended up building 7 generations of a custom IP server security gateway product, essentially an internet service provider in a box, which one generation of it lasted over a decade live on the net without substantive hardware and software changes, just security updates. And this set of companies that can make such an outrageous claim is an extraordinarily small number. Okay, and yet our team, we were able to pull together a set of experts from around the world, and we made it real. And it was a bit ahead of its time, and we had ended up having some sourcing problems, due to the primary hardware that we chose. It turns out that the manufacturer of it discovered that if you actually put in all the memory that it could fit, and you let the fans go too low, it would catch fire. It literally burn up. That made it unsuitable for an office environment. But the point is that turned out to be something that altered the experience for the clients that purchased the product. When they needed something new to have happen, what they discovered is that they could call us up, and instead of us telling them that it would be a significant procurement exercise, we could say, we'll turn that on for you. In some cases, there were additional hardware would be required, and we'd say, well, we have a defined fixed price option for that. This is what the hardware costs. This is what it costs. This is what your fixed price will be for us to install it and configure it for you. Okay. So the net result is that by fielding a machine that did not have a performance limitations from the start, it was way and above anything that would normally be put into an office. We could go through and make it, alter the IT experience for the clients, because we had gone through and figured out what the problem space was that needed to be dealt with, and what the potential solution space was. And the net result was that the client could feel that what they were investing in was in the box in terms of cost, schedule, and technical risk. In the space end of things, when we started off with the space to space power beaming work, the NASA's response was about being involved was not just no, but hell no. Okay, we were able to turn that around to the point where we were able to negotiate what's known as not just a Space Act agreement, but a Space Act umbrella agreement, where for technology development, demonstration, and deployment missions at the nexus of computer, robotics, and space systems engineering, we could go through and mint a new mission with what amounts to being an agreeable abstract that anyone at a NASA center with time card signature authority could sign off on, and that's what it would take to move forward. It didn't guarantee any NASA funding, but it allowed resources, government resources, whether or not they were facilities, hardware, software, civil servant or contractor, to be put against the work.
Wow.
And it allowed for funding overlays to go in either direction. Now, for a small company to be able to do that is extraordinary, if you forgive the pun in the name. NASA has had a very short history with respect to doing those sorts of agreements.
Sure.
So that's and that came about because we were challenged, just like the question you raised from a brave soul in NASA's administrator's office. She said, Gary, you talk a hell of a game. Okay, but what's real about this stuff?
Right.
Okay, and she challenged us. She said, if you can go through and get one mission, okay, through all of this, that another NASA center would technically vet and assert that there's some technical there, and be able to report that back to us. You'll not only get a Space Act agreement, you'll get the Space Act umbrella agreement to develop this. And what ended up happening is that I ended up at the point where it was almost a catch-22 situation, because the folks that had to do the technical vetting were 4 or 5 tiers down in engineering organizations at different NASA centers, and they don't talk to the administrator's office at NASA headquarters, and they sure as hell don't do so without going through their management. Mm-hmm. So I ended up going to see a friend and colleague, Dr. General Pete Warden, who was the NASA Ames Center Director at the time, and I said, Pete, I'm in trouble. I'm standing at the altar, and I don't know whether or not the bride's going to show up. Is there any way that you would consider having NASA Ames be a sponsor of our space-to-space power beaming mission? And he looked at me, and he laughed, and he said, Barnhard, sure, I'd probably get some real work out of you too. And we ended up setting up an arrangement, with the NASA Ames Mission Control Technologies lab, and we're able to have that run through the entire system, and get it signed off up through NASA headquarters, the administrator's office. And then I was able to take that, put it inside inserted into the Space Act umbrella agreement template and send it back to the administrator's office saying, I now have demonstrable proof that I've got, I have NASA's, concurrence that there's some technical there. And so they went with it and went in and proceeded to expand it to all the different NASA centers that wanted to participate. And so there is something to it. Is this a good way to make money? Okay. Quite frankly, I've spent a lot of money. Okay. My XISP Inc.'s contribution, cash and in kind, to the mission development effort is north of $3.5 million, as NASA has us calculate it, which is non-trivial, for a small business. In our case, we're a virtual enterprise with approximately 30 different, individual, consultants and various and sundry other, entities as part of the consortia. Now, others have gone through and put in significant amounts of their own resources as well in these different efforts. So they're, and we've, literally, our consortium folks range from individuals through small businesses to larger businesses, the likes of Raytheon and other large suspects in the aerospace business.
Great,
so
great.
there's something there.
Well, great. Gosh, Gary, wonderful and so interesting. Such a different approach to really bringing new technologies to market. This has been really interesting. Thank you so much for making time to be here today. We really appreciate it. If somebody wanted to learn more about XISP, what should they do?
You can go out to the website, www.xisp-inc.com. There's a selection of papers and presentations there that are available, and the site is being refreshed. And right now, I guess I'm north of 100 different presentations and papers in national and international fora, on the mission development related stuff, and the quest continues in no uncertain terms.
Excellent.
So we're looking forward to not just waiting for the future, but helping to build it.
Absolutely amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate your time and getting this great insight to XISP, as well as your amazing background. I also do want to take a moment to thank GuideForce for hosting these sessions. To learn more about GuideForce, visit guideforce.com, and we'll see you next time on the Tech and Space Leaders Show.
Thank you, Lisa. It's a pleasure.